Dr. David Smith, my friend, welcome back. Week 2.
Thank you. It's great to be with you again.
I appreciated your time last week. Appreciate it very much today. And thank you for the vulnerability and for the experiences and just speaking from the heart. I think it speaks to volumes the successful career you've had as a music director, band director, and administrator, now a district leader of a very large school corporation. But Dr. Smith, last week we wrapped up and you were talking about when you were hired for your role, a role that you didn't necessarily ever expect you would have, that it was going to be faith, family, then career in that setting. As you look at education today, what's different in the challenges for today's leaders to be able to live those values in that order? What's coming at them? Is it the pace? Is it the number of challenges that get faced? Is it tools that are more readily accessible in the world today than perhaps when you began your educational career?
Well, let me see. Let me take them one at a time. Yes to number one, yes to number two, and yes to number three. I think the pace, as I mentioned last week, starting July 1st, this will be my 14th year in the job. It is a different job than what I had 14 years ago. Not better nor worse, just different. I think it is what you make of it. But I think as a country, we're polarized. I always talk about collaborative efforts, and sometimes I think people now think that collaboration means that you lose. And no, I think collaboration means that everybody wins. You have to give of yourself for others to receive, and that's what collaboration is. I used to tell the story, and I'll just do a condensed version if that's okay. But my grandfather, great individual, drove a truck for 40 years, and toward the end of his life was on dialysis and struggled a bit. But I had found a violin that he had when he was a youngster, and it was in pieces. Well, I was a senior at the University of Evansville, worked at H&H Music, so I stripped it apart, put it back together again, and did everything, and put it in a weed eater box. And gave it to him for Father's Day. And when he unwrapped it and saw the weed eater box, he said, "Well, David, thanks, but I can't use this." I said, "Just open it up." And he pulled the violin out and knew that it was his. I tell that story a lot because it's only through giving that you can truly receive. Only through giving that you can truly receive. That's why I love to do what I do, because I think we give and invest in our kids all the time. But I tell that story because compromise is also giving and receiving. So in terms of polarization, I think that's a challenge. But the biggest challenge is kids today neurologically are wired a little bit differently than they were 15, 20 years ago because of screen time, because of how much time they're spending on devices, and because of prolonged kind of toxic stress. So that means we need to approach education differently than we did 15, 20 years ago. And that's why in the first or last week, we talked about status quo and all that. We can't continue to educate kids in a different environment the same way we did before and expect better results. That just doesn't work. And Deming said, and I think this is so true, every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. So if you want better results, you need to design a better system. So that's, I think, part of the change that comes at you so quickly. And how do you prepare your students for the future that they're going to face, a future that we can't even envision yet? But yeah, so some challenges.
Dr. Smith, you're speaking there, and a number of things come to mind. And I want to talk about one aspect you and I have spent just brief time discussing. You've talked about how the students being wired differently with all the screen context, and ability to contact. And, I know a lot of schools, and I think you mentioned Evansville, Vanderburg in particular, there's a great amount of research and study on the brain and those aspects as we take and utilize that with the challenges of social emotional, not only for our children, but the young adults and even the adult educators. And you all have done some fascinating work there. Talk a bit about how in your school today, how you're utilizing that available information to give consideration outside of the textbook itself.
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. We are, I think, acknowledged outside of Evansville and Southern Indiana as a leader in this work in the nation. Maybe not so much around our neighbors, but we have gained, I think, the attention of folks, Harvard, Yale, Johns Hopkins University, and others. But we have a framework called GAIN, which is Growth in Academics Through Innovation and Neuroeducation. And it is a framework that we make all of our decisions through based upon how the brain develops and based upon how the brain functions. So, and a lot of this makes sense, and some people do things just intuitively, but I'll use this as the example in terms of how the status quo always seems to be so present among educators. If a student struggles in math, we tend to give them more math and hopefully better math. But that in and of itself, while that is certainly necessary, in and of itself is not sufficient. So there are some underlying skill sets that students need before they can actually take on that cognitively complex task or cognition. So, and those are called executive functioning skills. So short-term memory, grit, resilience, all of those things. Now, in the past, students who had an architecture of the brain that was developed in a different time probably had the wiring of the brain and things in terms of executive functioning skills that were probably at a higher level than what some students are coming to school with today. But we still start with the assumption that they have all of that grit, resilience, short-term memory, everything that they need in order to take on those cognitively complex tasks. So we know that that's not the case. So there are certain things that we do through that framework that prepares the pathway for students to be able to be successful in school and beyond.
Wow, I think it's simply fascinating. And what I love and about today's world and what we're learning and what you just described, how it's being used in the schools real time in that fashion, we can all utilize what's been learned in that aspect. You know, when I was a child growing up, and if someone was talking to themselves, your parents and grandparents said you need to stay away from them. Well, today we know we need to talk to ourselves more and more positively to help us move forward. And we understand we can block the negative thoughts from coming in if we're
Right.
aware of that aspect.
Oh, completely agree. And then also, Kevin, just things that we did 20, 25 years ago that we thought were for the betterment of students, we now know was the exact opposite. For instance, when high stakes testing came in, I-STEP, many schools and many, if not most of ours did this. We cut back on recess, on playtime, thinking that we need to get more academics in. Well, we just completed this year a study, and I shouldn't call it a study, but we, through the which is the Minnesota Executive Functioning Scale, we did an assessment on all of our kindergarten students on their executive functioning skills and their state of readiness. And so we put a couple of things in place. One was called Cognimoves, which is a sequential movement that requires some memory and repetition. And then we also had another school that said, you know what, we're going to increase recess time by 15 minutes every day. It is amazing the outcomes that happened with that school that increased recess for their kindergartners 15 minutes a day. Amazing. And then, so we know that movement primes the brain. We know that now. Science has verified that. We also know how important hydration, drinking water is for priming the brain. So we embrace kids having their water bottle on their desk and drinking water, and then we will do some brain-based activities, get them up and get them moving so that then they have a vessel that is ready to take on those cognitively complex tasks. That's
Fascinating.
just two small examples.
Thank you for sharing. And, something jumped right to mind as I'm thinking. So we go back, and in my generation, at least, every day we were in the neighborhood with our friends. We were playing baseball in a sand lot. We were going fishing over the hill. We were playing basketball on the court. And, then you get into even the 1990s, 2000s, 10s, and today you hear all the grown-ups talking, well, we don't see kids do that anymore. Well, and then we work to move away from that in the schools, and we come back to find, you know what? Those of us that maybe weren't making decisions, we kind of had a feeling.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And now we have science to back up why that should remain in our schools.
Well, kudos to you all. Keep leading the way, you and your team and everyone involved. I think it's fascinating. I want to jump back. You used a word a moment ago called collaboration in that piece. And I think it's so critical. We hear either complaints or acceptance as leaders on well, you don't communicate, or you didn't communicate the right thing, or it wasn't the right time. But my experience tells me at this point, Dr. Smith, it's deeper than communication. It's collaboration, because I'm not smart enough to know what needs to be done on my own. I need you. I need someone else. But to effectively collaborate, I have to be open to connection, admitting to the fact that I don't have the answer. I need you to help me find the answer. And you know what? That's not a weakness to do that. It's a strength.
Absolutely. I think two words that are overlooked so much in leadership are reflection and humility. And effective leaders reflect upon their current state and then implement strategies for that desired or dream or future state. But, and I've told my team this all the time, and they say, well, David, this isn't hard for you to do. But I say, I don't ever want to be the smartest person in the room. And that's where they say, not a problem for you, David. But no, seriously, because I don't want to be the limiting factor. I really don't. And schools, society in general, but schools are a microcosm of society. Schools are so complex nowadays that it's a fool who thinks that they're an expert in everything. Okay. And it's not enough to surround yourself with a group of people. I want to surround myself with a team of people. There's a difference between groups and teams. And while groups and teams may share in common a common goal, a team has individuals and positions that are developed with expertise that have specific objectives to accomplish, and they work in concert and they have that shared responsibility, which I truly think what is at the essence of collaboration. It is that collective wisdom. It's that collective responsibility. It's locking arms together saying, we're going to get this accomplished for the betterment of A, B, and C.
Dr. Smith, I've had an opportunity, yourself included, to work with a number of team members of your peers, from the district office to the buildings to classroom instructors, perhaps interns in your schools in that piece. And one thing has always jumped out at me that's been very consistent. It didn't matter if it was a high school, an assistant superintendent, a coach, an athletic director. It was very consistent. And I find this fascinating from this standpoint, not surprising, very refreshing. But I go back to the quote that John Maxwell has said many times: we can't lead until we can effectively follow. And that just resonates so much with me. Your team represents that. There's no egos on who's out in front. And if Dr. David Smith's on a team, we may well find Dr. David Smith as follower number 5 in the project, so to speak. But it's a natural aspect about the heartbeat of you, your team, and your school corporation.
Well, thank you for that. And I think that may be the biggest compliment that anyone could give me. It is what I believe, but I think even more than that, it's what we've developed and how we invest. So no, that's a humbling statement to hear. Thank you.
Dr. Smith, as you look at the world today, and we hear about the lack of individuals with interest to come into education, share your experience. Are you all seeing that today? What will it take to turn the corner and start that interest back up?
Once again, Kevin, another great question. I think I'm starting to see the reversal of that. We bring people in every week for onboarding. And so we've had 3 different sets of teachers new to EVSC, and about 35 to 40% of them are coming to us from other school systems or setups. But the quality is very, very high. I think, it's interesting because one of the things that I challenged myself with this year, as well as my team, is to not accept the premise of any statement, which simply means, and I think we do this so often in society that we listen to a news source or whatever, and then we question, well, what's their slant? What are they trying to promote? So what I'm trying to do, and what I'm encouraging my team to do, is just not accept the premise blindly. Let's dig down. Let's distill what could be the reason, what's really happening. And I think we now see some individuals that understand that teaching is the most noble and worthy profession ever. I mean, you're going to spend your entire career, your entire personal life, helping others have a better life. I can put my head on the pillow every night knowing that I'm doing God's work if I am able to actually help someone else have a better life. And I think people understand that. It's also interesting that sometimes when things get challenging, you kind of see folks that were in it maybe for other reasons. And then that core, I think, has always remained. And I think that core now is starting to get a little bit bigger because they do know, hey, I want to have meaning in my life. And in order for me to have meaning in my life, I have to give others that sense of meaning too. I want to invest in others. So there's
I love that.
nothing better than teaching.
I love that. And it resonates from God's purpose. If our purpose is to love God and love others, but also to love as Jesus loved us and change the world, what better profession to serve in that regard, in that fashion?
Yeah. And who's the best teacher that ever walked earth?
Oh,
Jesus Christ.
he put together the first succession plan, which I know is huge in large school corporations today, right?
Yeah.
But you are exactly right in that aspect. Dr. Smith, speaking of the faith piece, you're a man of faith. It can be difficult as a career person for individuals today, whether it's in education or other careers, service, manufacturing, governmental, or what have you, to be able to live their faith, so to speak, in the professional way in that aspect. How have you been successful? Because I sense you've been true to David Smith's calling from the get-go.
Well, yeah, I am who I am, and I'm the individual that God shaped me to be. It's interesting in public education. I think sometimes there's at least a misunderstanding, or perhaps it's my misunderstanding. We are an example, and we should be role models. I think the difference is that I don't advocate a single faith, which I don't think we should do in public education. If parents want their child to be exposed to a singular faith, then there are schools, I think, that can do that. But that doesn't mean that we are devoid of faith. That doesn't mean that I need to leave my faith or my belief at the doorstep. I am who I am. I think parents want an authentic self. I also think that parents probably don't want me to say, this is how you should believe. And I don't do that. Okay. But I hope that anybody that sees me would know and hear and knows my heart, knows that there's something deeper in there than just this existence on earth as we see it.
Well, it comes out every time you and I speak in a very natural, heartfelt manner. Dr. Smith, with your years of experience, years of success, and life of significance of bringing tremendous value in a positive way to so many, what's something you've had a lessons learned or a word of advice you might pass along to that educator, leader just beginning their career today?
There's no right way to do a wrong thing. Might be one way to say it. I've learned that, you're going to make mistakes. And, if you make mistakes for the right reason, that's okay. It's not the mistake that you make, it's how you respond to the mistake. I think is one way to look at it. I also, I have little Smithisms because I can only remember like small snippets of things. But, one of the things is that all change or all improvement requires change, but not all change is improvement. So when you think about that, we need to continue to evolve. We need to continue to change. I think that's what we're called to do. I also know that change is difficult. There's a neurological component, a physiological component to change, and people are change adverse. So one of the things I've learned as a leader is if you make change visible and you let people know what's going to happen, that takes away some of that natural fear that's associated with change and gives them some comfort, and then change is more readily obtained. But I mean, it's maybe the biggest thing I've learned is that don't be afraid to try things. We kind of know what we're going to get if we continue to do what we have always done. And if we want better, then we just have to do better and be better.
Said another way, just eliminate the box from the get-go and go from there, right?
There you go. And, you can say, just don't ever accept the premise of, don't ever accept why people tell you it is a certain way.
I love that. And Dr. Smith, speaking of change, Dr. Smith, the leader we see today, as we're finishing this second week together, if we stood him up next to the Dr. Smith of X years ago when you started your administrative leadership career, where would the change be seen at most notably?
Wow. As I said, I've coined some phrases along the way. I think I would more readily understand that one's actions speak to one's beliefs.
Mm,
And I would not be, um, I think I would be more action oriented, if you will. Maybe this is the best way to answer this. Uh, Multiple times, and in the classes that I'm blessed to teach for Oakland City, I ask people to write down characteristics of outstanding leaders.
mm,
And invariably, they will write down 80% of the words they write down will be nouns.
mm,
Okay. It's interesting. Only about 20% of them will actually be action oriented verbs. So it's one thing to be a visionary. It's another thing to be able to execute on one's vision. So that's a way I think of me saying a younger version of me, knowing what I know now. I think I would try to be more clear in in my expectations. I would be more action oriented, and I would have others help hold me accountable as I hold them accountable.
Thank you for speaking to that, Dr. Smith, and that comparison. Just a building question, if I may. With your experience as a leader, 14 years now as a district leader, is it possible for a leader to grow the visionary aspect? Said another way, and again, John Maxwell, one of the I think the leading leadership expert in our world today, someone who's vastly needed, values principle based, will say those leaders, especially those on the high road, see the bigger picture. They see it sooner and they see it farther out than those who aren't on the high road leadership. Your experience when it comes to vision and seeing that bigger picture into the future, is that something for our younger leaders today that they can further develop, or do you sense that's more of a natural ability within one?
Well, I think that may kind of be bucketed like leadership is. Leadership's kind of a third percent of who you are, a third percent of your experiences, and third percent of
Mm,
training. But I think perhaps the difference maker is if the leader doesn't set the vision, who will?
mm,
So oftentimes, one of the challenging aspects I think of leadership is to be able to be that telescope, to be able to
mm,
focus in
mm,
at the 5 foot level and then be able to zoom out and see the 30-foot level. Oftentimes we get so consumed by the doing, by the status quo, by just keeping the wheels turning that we don't zoom out and see that bigger, broader
mm.
picture. Always operate on your moral compass. If you're here for the benefit of students, that should always be your focus. And then that helps you have a more visionary approach. And then you need to have folks around you that make certain you act on that vision and hold everybody accountable, yourself included.
I love that. What's next for you, Dr. Smith? What's your next growth piece?
I truly am this year because I love this time of year. This is my January 1st. This is our reset. After we get a school year over, it's going to be a new school year. We're focusing on. I'm focused on specifically on growing leaders in my leaders and growing leaders in people that want to ascend into leadership. And then as a district, there is so much negativity and people wanting to look at our students that have some need as victims. And it's like, no, we need to see the positive aspect of them. We need to see their strengths. We need to see the aspirational goals that they have. Because if we don't see that in them, then who should they expect that will see that in them? We know they're all God's gifts to us. We need to work in that collaborative manner to build them up in a way that is very positive, and our approach with them has to be positive. So that's going to be our focus this year: leadership and that strength-based look at all of our students and every opportunity that we have.
And that's terrific. What a high level of focus from you as the district leader. And Dr. Smith, if someone watching or listening would like to talk to you and just get some more of your guidance and experience, how might they find you?
Well, find me most days and nights in the corporation office, but no, they can certainly call school corporation at 812-435-8477, and they'll put you through. We have a great communications team. We do a number of podcasts. for school board recaps and things like that. So there's a lot of information about EVSC out there, and hope that that is a good reflection of what we stand for as a district and what we stand for as individuals helping our fellow man.
Dr. Smith, you were talking about God not letting you lose out on this opportunity to be a district leader. And I had an opportunity before we sat down to record today to take part in a leadership training. And an individual I have a high degree of respect for, Ray Popham, who's a pastor, and he's a leadership a mentor, president of one of the John Maxwell committee teams, leadership wise, was attributed to having once said, and I think this quote resonates from the time we spent together these past 2 weeks, for who you are, but what your vision is and how your team executes that vision. Because I think you're very well connected in my experience. But the quote is something like this, and it basically goes, we should be good at what we do, but we should be great at who we are in every moment and everything we do. And I think that speaks to you as a leader, your team around you as leaders, but in particular to classroom instructors within your school corporation and everywhere. Being great with who we are, we'll be good, and we'll make those connections, and we'll help those students love themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great.
Dr. Smith, I love you. God bless you again. Thank you for your words of wisdom and your time, my friend.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been a blessing to me. Take care. God bless.
Take care. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed Dr. David Smith, the superintendent at Evansville Vanderburg School Corporation. Check out their website. Give him a call through the district office, and he'll be more than happy to help you. And please know, you're not in this alone. We're all here. God bless you. I love you. Have a great day.